Hey, welcome everybody. This is a special weekend here at Community of Hope. We've been talking about it for several weeks. This is a male Dale weekend. We're having a Q&A with our lead pastor, Dale Locke, here. We're really excited about it. It's going to be an awesome time together in church today. Now, we're really thrilled about this because you guys have submitted some really great questions, and some of them are so good. We're really hoping that this turns into kind of a nail Dale type of a time. No, but it's going to be, we're really excited about this. This is going to be really good. So here's what we're going to be doing. We're not actually doing this live in any of our campuses. We actually recorded this beforehand for a couple different purposes. First off, we're experimenting with video, like we've been saying we want to do to try to better effectively communicate to all of our campuses out in Loxahatchee and West Palm Beach, and even online to everybody who's streaming with us there. So that's one of the main reasons why we're trying this out, but there's also another really important reason why we're recording this ahead of time, and I'm going to let Dale answer that.
Yeah, so I am going to have surgery tomorrow. So many of y'all know that the day after Thanksgiving, I fell off a ladder. It's a really lame story. I think all the time.
Wait, you weren't deadlifting for CrossFit?
No, I wish I had a better story. And so I have completely torn the ACL, and I've almost torn the meniscus. And so I'm going to have surgery tomorrow to repair all of that. And so by the time you guys are seeing this, I suspect I hope I'm sleeping it all off. That's what I'm hoping I'm doing.
We'll see about that.
Yeah. So appreciate the prayers on that.
Yeah. And truth be told, we originally scheduled to do this live at our campuses.
Correct.
But because of the injury and the surgery Dale is having, the technology provides us a wonderful opportunity to try something different.
Yeah, that's great.
So Dale, you ready to answer these questions?
I'm ready, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the first one. This is from me versus everybody else here
Okay.
when we're talking about love and sex and relationships in our series, The Naked Truth.
Yeah.
But before we jump into any of that, why do you like doing Q&As? Because I've noticed this about you after serving here for several years now. You love to do Q&As. You actually thrive in those environments where you let anybody and everybody ask you anything they want to at partnership gatherings at the East Campus, here at the West Campus, and even today. So can you tell me why you value this and why you enjoy doing it?
Yeah, that's a great lead-in question. I get really passionate about these things for really a couple of reasons. The first reason is this. I started ministry, I think, my gosh, Trevor, I started ministry, I think, as a pastor in 1988. So that's a long time ago. So
I was 5 then. Is that okay?
Are you trying to make a point
No,
around that?
no, let's just move on.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so at any rate, a long time ago, and I would say around that I have learned over the years as a pastor that there are a lot of well-meaning people who are trying to really interpret biblical truth and walk with Christ in a winsome and an authentic way. And more and more across the years, I feel like my ministry has turned into a little bit of almost like a life coach from a biblical point of view. Yeah. And so I'm pretty passionate about that. And so I really want us to understand biblical truth, that we can apply it to our lives. It can make create spaces in our lives, whereas one author I follow says, we can make better decisions and have fewer regrets. Yeah, that's a great thing. Right. And then I think the other thing for me, it's an opportunity tactically to advance the ball. Yeah. And you know this, when we're putting together series, we'll take a subject matter in a series, and we'll try to block the series out around some of the most important or generally well thought of things within a series, and some of the minor topics we don't get to. Right. So this is an opportunity to go at some other material in a way that we might not preach about on a Sunday morning, and throw the ball farther down the field. So it's exciting to me.
Where we get to speak to specific topics instead of just a broad audience.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive right in, okay?
Okay, yep.
Okay, so we have a couple questions right off the bat that I want to talk about the issues of premarital sex and singleness and dating all together, because we have a lot of different demographics who have questions about love, sex, and relationships. Okay. So here's the first one. Okay. Everyone asks this one: how far is too far, and where is the line? Wow.
Okay. Appreciate the lame question to start. Great softball question here. So let me just say right at the beginning, with respect to the line, I'll kind of answer that quickly in two ways. I think clearly the questioner is probably asking, is it okay to be sexually involved outside of marriage? And here's the thing. There's no witness of that in Scripture. The biblical answer to that from the writers of Scripture is sexual intimacy is to be reserved for one man, one woman in a monogamous marriage relationship. So there's the answer. Don't shoot me. I'm just the messenger. I didn't make up the message.
Right.
But that's it. I think, secondly, that question always is interesting to me because it almost sounds like people are saying this. How far can I go,
right?
And still get away with it?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. How far can I go up to the Grand Canyon without falling?
Correct.
Right, yeah.
And I think so. Even that question is the way we're asking that question is not really the wisest way to answer it. I like to take it out of the immediate moment and go, okay, so you're going to answer for that in a year, 2 years, 5 years, and at that point, are you going to regret that you went where you shouldn't have gone? Or are you going to, frankly, even be tempted to lie about it when your kids ask you one day?
Oof.
Yeah, so I try to think of it more broadly than that. But yeah, way to start off with a great question.
Okay, another question about singleness and dating and all of that.
Sure.
We have lots of singles in our church.
We do.
Some are younger and have never been married, and they're looking for the right one.
Yeah.
And some are older, and they used to be married, and either through divorce or through death have become single again, and they're widows or widowers and whatnot. And so we have a lot of really heartfelt questions from people about that. And so here's one of them. This is just so heartfelt. It says, how do you find contentment in being single while you are praying and waiting for God to fulfill the desire that you have for the godly man or woman he has for you?
Yeah.
And so not only that, how do you handle the loneliness and the pain of not having anyone, especially with God's design for couples and being in a couple-oriented world?
Yeah, I just have tremendous compassion for, frankly, many of the folks you're referencing here, my friends, in this category. And, I think it would be easy for me to have a lot of answers around things that I don't deal with because I'm married, and so I have a lot of compassion around this. But I can tell you, here's the two areas that I feel like become real areas of struggle for those who are single, and by that I mean single now, never been married, single again, or whatever that is. I would just say this is what I often see the two ditches we fall into. One, clearly, is we settle.
Yeah.
And I would just say to everyone in the room who's single, do not lower your standards. Do not settle because you feel like, I see folks get hooked up with relationships. They're not great. They don't even connect in so many different ways, but they feel like, well, this is my last shot.
Yeah, this is it.
This is it. I better do it. Oh my gosh. Never works well.
Right.
Never works well. The other thing I would say is a ditch I see fairly often is we make this the one area in our lives that we feel like that would complete us. And so we're incomplete in this area. And when I notice friends who I think who are single that are navigating this well, here's what I would say. They don't do that. They move on with their lives. They continue to pray for the right person to come along, the prince or princess, to come along. But they are investing in their lives in every way. They're able to invest in their career in ways maybe sometimes those of us who are married can't. They invest in their personal lives in ways. They have rich and deep friendships, and a lot of them. They don't live their life just for themselves.
Right.
They invest. And a lot of times when I ask people about that, they're living, frankly, lives of great contentment, while at the same time holding on to the tension of, I really hope to find someone one day. And often it's interesting. It's that kind of an approach, Trevor, that leads them to find that person.
That's fascinating.
So,
where I'm holding out hope, but I'm also not putting my life on pause.
Absolutely. Do not settle. Do not put your life on pause, I think, is the best way to play that.
Yeah. I want to loop around to the second part of the question here that is so fascinating. I've talked about this in our preparation for this time, where this person asked that this is hard to be single, especially They say God's designed for couples, but here's the kicker. He said, and being in a couple-oriented world in a marriage-centric culture.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, here's what I want to say, and I think this may rattle the cage a little bit of the local church, and this is why I would hope. I've been here a long, long time. The church started in our living room. I do think sometimes the church has a tendency, capital C, big church, even we here at Community of Hope, we have a tendency to be married-centric. We do a lot of events for married people. We have a lot of focus on married people and that relationship. And while that's important, and while we wouldn't step back from that, I think we have some learning to do in this area.
All right, Dale, so let's broaden this just a little bit more about sex, dating, premarital sex, all that stuff. So we had a question that came in today of what parameters should I empower my accountability team with? Possibly name some specific questions they can ask me. So this is obviously somebody who's not married, who faces sexual temptations like everybody else, but they're trying to live in God's way and means for sexuality. So what would you say to them if they have Christian community? How can they empower their friends to help keep them accountable?
Yeah, great. Okay, let's go right at that. First of all, I think every single one of us, as we're growing in our relationship with Christ, needs to welcome spiritual accountability into our lives and spiritual community into our lives. Probably the one single factor that has been, over time, the most significant practice in my life that has helped me in a lot of these areas is spiritual accountability and spiritual community. I mean, I don't even know that there's a close second. I mean, even the study of the scriptures and all that, as powerful as that is, obviously, this is where it becomes real.
Yeah.
You know, in moments like this. So that, first of all, that's a great question. Anybody that's asking that question is seeking the mind and heart of God. Yeah. And I just want to say, man, well done around that regard. So let me just go at it personally for me. Okay, first of all, I would say what we've been branding in our series, we've been saying this, okay, with respect to our sexuality, all of us have temptations because we're human beings, and all of us have regrets. Right. Every single one of us. So really the playing field gets pretty level pretty quickly in this area. So for me, when I think about questions my accountability group has, these are some of the questions we'll often ask ourselves, to be pretty blunt about it. We'll ask each other if we're clean. And by that, we mean a host of things. Are you looking at anything you shouldn't look at on the internet? Yeah. That's part of that question. Are you watching anything on TV or Netflix that really you shouldn't be watching? That if the kids came in the room, or your spouse came in the room, or your friend or your pastor came in the room, you'd be diving for the remote. I think that's a bit of a question we ought to ask each other. So we'll ask that, are we clean? Also this, where is your mind? When we ask, are you clean? We're asking this, where does your mind wander and end up, where's the space it ends up being? Right. And so when we ask one another in my accountability group, are we clean? We're asking that. If so, where is your mind wandering to, and does it stay there? All of us have proclivities. And by that I mean all of us have certain areas of temptation that are more areas of temptation for us than other areas. Those are the spaces where I choose to arm my spiritual friends with that knowledge. And when they have that knowledge, they can ask me questions around that, and it'll get right to the point of the disposition of my heart.
All right, change of topics.
Okay.
We're going to talk to people who are married now about love and sex and relationships, for marriage in particular.
All right.
Okay, so here's the first one. It says here, my wife is more like my roommate. And so it sounds like a lot of intimacy has dissipated from the relationship. And it's just dull. What would you say to somebody in that situation?
Sure. There are a lot of folks who navigate, the different seasons of a marriage relationship, and some navigate them well, and others, have different points along the way where they struggle. This is not an uncommon question that I'm asked every now and again. Some of the things that I think about from a broad sense around this, first of all, I always think about emotional investment. Any in any intimacy quotient in a marriage is obviously connected at some level to relational investment. And a lot of times what happens
Can
is
you say that one more time?
any intimacy quotient within a relationship, up or down, rises or falls around a relational investment.
That was worth the price of admission right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really what I try to tell people in this area and have them navigate and think through, every season requires a different relational component. And sometimes when you think about the seasons of investment, say when kids are, man, I just think back to the high school days of our two girls, and we were flying and going 90 miles an hour in a million different directions at the same time. That was hard to navigate. And then all of a sudden they're up and gone. They're in college. And, a lot of couples struggle there.
Right.
And now they look at each other across the table and go, I don't even know who you are. Yeah. I mean, we haven't been investing in a long time. Sometimes there's a season at work that creates that. Sometimes there's a difficulty within the relationship that has never been talked through.
Right.
Sometimes there's medical or physical problems that come into play in these areas. I always encourage couples, first of all, to sit down in a blame-free, shame-free environment and talk through those things.
Right.
If there are impasses you can't get through, it's time to reach out and go talk to somebody, a therapist, a counselor, a pastor, this sort of thing. I always hope pastors are as such qualified when they're above their pay grade in an area to go, I can't really help you there, but I can refer you to someone who can. I think that's really what's important. Sometimes the sheen comes off a relationship in the intimacy level as things shift and change and all of that. And I think that's a conversation all along the way.
Okay, another shift in topics here.
Okay.
Let's talk about kids, and let's talk about having the talk.
Having the talk
With kids.
Well, there's a couple things I would say just even around that whole topic of conversation with respect to our children. A couple things just random off the top of my head is I think too often what I see parents do is we have this we hijack a moment that we've not really prepared, and we have this awkward 10-15 minute talk with kids who are not at that point even interested in sex, even though they've probably heard about it. I think the average age of a child hearing about sexuality is about 9.
Yeah.
So, and we have this awkward, so most of us enter into it late. They're not really as interested as we think they are. We blister them with this weird, awkward conversation.
Let me tell you about the birds and the bees, Johnny.
We close the door down and we never talk about it again. And this is going to be a part of their life, for the better part of their life, and this is an important part of it and a part that God has created for us to enjoy. Here's all that deal. So I try to say this, rather than have a 15-minute awkward conversation, how about a 10 or 15-year conversation in which you are helping them understand along the way? I know that Beth and I chose with our girls, we tried to do this in a way that was that didn't feel awkward, that didn't feel weird, that they never felt shame if they asked a question, that they knew they could talk to us about things, and that we would launch them into that part of their life once they got married, and it would be this beautiful thing. And I just think to do that, we have to have a new way that we really go about this topic.
So a lot of people submitting questions about divorce.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this is a lot of people writing from experience about divorce, and so it's not so much classroom theory and Bible trivia.
Yeah.
But let me just read this to you.
Okay.
Someone says, I'm divorced. Sometimes Scripture is very graceful around divorced people, like Jesus with the woman at the well. She had 5 husbands and then was living with somebody who was not her husband. And then other times Jesus seems pretty strict on it, like in Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And so can you help me navigate my relationship future, and how do I make sense of all of this?
Yeah, this is really an important topic, and a lot of us, frankly, I would imagine there isn't a person listening to my voice right now who has not been impacted by this, either in their own personal life or in the life of someone very close to them.
Absolutely.
It just touches touches everybody. Few general observations around the topic of divorce that sometimes I hear that bother me a little bit as a pastor. We have to remember that the scripture writers say it very clearly: God hates divorce.
Right.
Sometimes when I hear that vetted in a local church, it sounds more like this: God hates divorced people.
Yeah.
And God doesn't hate any person.
Right.
He doesn't hate any person anywhere ever. And so I struggle with that. So I think sometimes our language needs to be improved, as well as our theology. Now, let me go back to the topic where, or the way I teed this up. The scripture writers say it: God hates divorce. And again, what I try to do in my own life and my own experience with the Lord is that whenever I see something that's so strong or so prohibitive, I want to look for supporting evidence around that. And I can just say, as a pastor, divorce it rips a hole in life in so many ways. It's just difficult. People go swinging at this for the rest of their lives as a result of this. And I think part of the cultural problem is we get into relationships quickly.
Right.
We don't do our work to get into relationships. And I've done my fair share of weddings, and know that some of the people that I did weddings for are no longer married. It grieves me when I hear that.
Yeah.
So we jump into it quickly, and then we jump out of it quickly.
Right.
Of course, the scriptures were written at a time when women were little more than property.
Right.
And the man had all the ability to say when the relationship ended and all of that. And when Jesus is speaking about that, he's at first challenging that.
Exactly.
So frankly, he's ennobling the cause of women and elevating the cause of women in Scripture. And if we take a wider angle lens and look at that, it's clear to see.
Yeah, like how men can't treat them as just disposable objects and just divorce.
Absolutely. Right. The other thing I often tell people when they're navigating the ending of a marriage that looks like it's headed for divorce and not going to work, I tell them this every time: turn over literally every single stone before you do that. Let that be the absolute last result.
Right.
Because one day you're going to have to tell and explain to your kids what happened. And in that moment, you're going to want to have as much integrity as you can have in that moment. And you're going to want to be able to look in the mirror, and you're going to want to be able to say, I tried every single thing I could try to keep this marriage alive. And at the end of the day, it didn't work.
What would you say to people who are divorced? One question particularly that came in, again, several right around this area, where both parties are on their second marriage, and they found Christ together with their family. What do you say to them when they read some of these scriptures about divorce and it makes them break out into a sweat of, oh no?
Well, again, I mean, I think the scriptures are very strong around it. The writers of scripture, there was a sense, and I don't want to take any of the heat off of that. They were writing in a particular context, again, where women were often property and men held all the rights. I would say this, especially for couples that have come together, it's a second marriage, do your best job now.
Yeah.
Do your best job now. Receive forgiveness for your part of whatever was the breaking up of that previous relationship. I think it's important to rake through the coals of that. Is there forgiveness work that needs to happen now? Do you need to go back to someone? Do you need to explain better to children of that marriage? Do what you need to do to be walking in grace, walking in forgiveness. But I would also say accept His grace and accept His forgiveness, and turn your heart around and go in this path. And go in this path in a God-honoring way. Go clear and go clean.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so another section of questions, another topic altogether.
Great.
Of course, in any sermon series that we do, in any Q&A that we're going to do, we're talking about love, we're talking about sex, and relationships, and questions that people have. The LGBTQ community, of course, is going to come up. Lots of people in our congregation have questions about this themselves. Lots of people in our congregation have friends and loved ones who identify as gay or lesbian. There are people even in our church who identify as gay and lesbian.
Yeah.
And so there's just a whole series of questions here that people generously want to know what you think about some of this.
Sure.
And so here's the first one. This obviously comes from somebody who has a family member who's identifying as gay or lesbian. And they say, I have a family member who has come out of the closet recently. Okay. It's caused a lot of turbulence in some of our relationships. What do I do?
Yeah. First of all, even your tee up is great because, we are a church that is very clearly said we are going to love everybody always. And period. So, we do have folks who self-identify as gay or lesbian in our congregation. Frankly, some of my really good friends are in this category, even friends for whom they know we don't stand in the same place around some of these issues, but they know that we love them and that we care for them and that we have friendships. So this is a really important topic. So I think it would be important for everybody to know. Probably over the last year, I would say 3 or 4 times, maybe it would be 4 or 5 times. I had someone on my calendar that wanted to meet with me, and this is the question they asked. They've had a loved one, a son or a daughter, who has come out to them, and they don't know what to do with that information. And I always, when I'm in those conversations and invited in, I try to really encourage, first of all, everybody to take a breath. This is not the news of somebody dying. Right. This is not a death. And I have respect that it's a shift. And I've had a parent say to me, well, it was the death of some of my dreams and aspirations I may have had for a particular child. And I have respect and grace around that. But I think what's important we have to remember is that we, even when we hear news like this, it's important not to do anything that would endanger the relationship, and that we would continue to be the parent, we would continue to love, we would continue to be in relationship. I can speak from my own personal experience in this way. I have yet to meet someone who identifies as gay or lesbian who, when I talk to them about that, tell me they made a decision to be gay or lesbian. I just don't, maybe somebody else has that experience. I personally don't have that experience. Here's really more how it develops. They discover they're gay or lesbian. Yeah. And then they try to do unique things to not be gay or lesbian. And then they sometimes go down a path that gets pretty dark and pretty depressive. And I've had people tell me that when I discovered this about myself, I tried to take my own life. Wow. And there's a path that is pretty difficult to follow once that admission is out. And I've yet to have anybody in my experience who made that decision. It's more like a discovery.
Okay, so another question that's widely asked in all the LGBTQ conversation stuff is, can someone be gay and be a Christian?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm asked this question fairly often, and here's an interesting thing. This is currently a debate even within the gay Christian community. And really what's interesting is when people ask this, sometimes I can tell people are really asking something that they don't know they ask, and they're asking, and it's something even broader than this. The conversation really has to involve same-sex sexual practice. Does the Bible condone same-sex sexual practice? Okay. So within the gay Christian community, there's one side of the debate, and frankly, they're called side A of the gay Christian community, feel like when they read the scriptures, primarily there's 6 scriptures, when they read those 6 scriptures, they feel like there is a way for them to be engaged in same-sex sexual practice. So they would condone that. Side B Christians in the gay Christian community read the same-sex scriptures and feel like those scriptures are prohibitive in nature every single time, and therefore the writers of Scripture, the witness of Scripture, and I would add the witness of Christian history, does not support same-sex sexual practice. Now, here's the thing. That is the camp that our church would fall in.
That's prohibitive.
I read those scriptures. Honestly, I would say, kind of tongue-in-cheek and maybe not so tongue-in-cheek, I've tried to find the loophole when I read Scripture and want to honor what Scripture says. It's not there. I don't see that it's there.
Right.
So this is not something I think that Community of Hope is going to change its mind on. It's not something that I'm going to change my mind on. But that's the debate. So can you be gay and be Christian? I say, yes, you can. Can you be a gay Christian and engage in same-sex sexual practice? I would say no to that. That's just the camp that I fall in. Again, a lot of difference. I would say this very clearly. We have both sides of this represented in our church. And both sides know I love them. Even for my gay Christian friends who know I stand in a different place than them around this issue, they know I love them. They know I care for them. They know I want to be their pastor. We're friends. This is how we want to do it as a Christian community. There's been a lot of hateful things in this category. We are not a part of that. We're just not.
Great. Okay. Another question kind of in this vein. We have people who ask us this, honestly, decently frequently. There's questions all about do I attend a gay wedding of a loved one? So this is obviously somebody who might come from the more traditional prohibited perspective that we're talking about, where they want to show love, like the type of loving church we aspire to be. At the same time, they have this conflict of what they read in the scriptures and what does it mean if I attend or not. What do you say to that?
I am asked that question a frequent amount because, again, the national conversation has shifted and laws have shifted, and so this has become much more of a thing where we see this in our culture. We're going to get invited, and here's what I say. I think people, I think what we should try to do as Christians, and I think what Jesus did. Again, I'm always fascinated by the idea that Jesus, it said of Jesus, he was a friend of sinners. And when you look at that, he was a friend of sinners. And when I really kind of burrow into that, Jesus had this incredible ability not to show disdain for people even when he disagreed with them.
Man,
I think it's just a powerful, powerful thing. And so a lot of folks are asked to be in attendance, maybe at a gay wedding or this sort of thing, and they get conflicted around this. And part of what I would say, as is the nature of any true relationship, be communicative and be open and honest in that relationship. If you choose, however you choose, go offline with this person or go offline with this couple so that they understand clearly. If you're like me and you're side B in the conversation and you don't agree with same-sex sexual practice, I think you need to be able to communicate that whether you attend or whether you don't. I often tell people it's a personal decision, but don't leave any room for a lack of clarity. If you're not going to come, that could be harmful. So I would say go offline and explain why. If you are going to go but you disagree, go offline and explain why, but you're going to be there. And I just think a lot of times if we would just do that, that would be helpful. And I always ask respectfully of my gay Christian friends. I would say, or even I have gay friends who don't self-identify as Christians. I would say, you've got to be graceful to us too. I mean, we're all navigating toward greater understanding. We need you to give us space to have understanding too. And sometimes I have friends in the Christian community who say they feel like they're not given grace. And I would say we both need to give grace.
If we're going to learn how to be a civil society again, that we have to learn how to do this better.
I just think so. I try to live under the rubric of, love all people everywhere. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's what we all should strive to.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Dale, we are out of time right now, and we just appreciate all your openness and your willingness to take any and every question that our church has. We surely didn't get to all the questions that we have, but we're going to be finding ways to get those out to our church and find different ways to help get some answers to those things.
Yeah.
And so we just want to take a minute to honor you and honor the legacy that you've created for this church, how this started, like you said, in your living room to where it's at now, and we're broadcasting to a couple of different campuses. It's really cool. It's really cool. So we honor you and we thank you for your time, and we're praying for you for your recovery.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks. And again, pray for Beth in my recovery. That would be fantastic. She's the one who needs the prayer.
Great.
So,
well, we're going to send this back to your live host wherever you're attending now. God bless you.